All right, everybody. So we're going to give you a little rundown of our thoughts on how to get started as far as choosing the art that you want to do. So we're going to leave self-defense out of it for now, and we're going to leave out the competition styles. So we're just going to talk about the actual arts, like the long journey. So if that's what you're looking for, these are some things to consider. So first of all, health benefits. So what do you think are health benefits?
General fitness is a big one. There's a lot of cardio and strength benefits that come along with it, just like people go to the gym for. So that's a very obvious benefit that comes along with that for your health.
Yeah. So what we see with the martial arts is that things that you would have to specifically train for a little more in like the fitness realm, so like weightlifting, whatever, your core strength is going to increase because it's actually where most of your power is generated. So if you're studying, like say you're going to do breaking later on, like breaking, they do a lot of that in competition. We use it as a proof of an evaluation of the student, like have they reached a certain level, right? So
breaking of solid objects like bricks.
Yeah, not
boards.
people. Although that's up to you. But anyway, don't laugh. So anyway, but yeah, so being able to reach a level of proficiency. So long-term benefits though, so like our system is Chinese and it's an internal system. So we have a more holistic view of things. And that's how we're going to advise you in this process. So if you're, depending on your age and things that are going to impede you, so we'll just look at it from this point. So if you are young, you might want to do a kicking art. When you get old, like most of the Taekwondo stylists I know that have stayed in it, they're in their 50s and they're having hip replacements. And I don't want to be a part of that. So, I have shoulder damage from my occupation. I've been fortunate not to have anything from the art. But, and what I've actually found out is that martial arts has kept me stronger and healthier. Every time I do have an injury, I fall back on martial arts to heal me. So that's interesting the way that works. So anyway, that's the process, a little bit of it. So you may want to choose, so if you want something that's just completely internal, you might want to try Tai Chi. And, Tai Chi is a very slow, steady, even art, but it's very internal. And what we've seen in like teaching and instructing is that people, they may be physically fit for their occupation, like a bricklayer or whatever, and so within the mobility they have to have, they're very strong, but like the postures and stances that you have to achieve in essentially the kata, I don't like to call it kata, all right, it's called, Chinese usually call it form, but within the forms we see that they don't have the strength and balance and stability to maintain what,
those assisting muscles in
yeah,
your body.
so like the twitch fiber and all that stuff. So interesting, like there's a big thing out now that like the farm carry for on the farm where you're carrying 2 buckets or whatever is one of the best things for skeletal development and stuff. Well, martial arts kind of does that same thing. So anyway, and then but there's also, so you have to look at the genres. So you want we're talking about pursuing an art which is more like we're looking at very traditional. So there's, within that you have groundwork, which would be like jiu-jitsu, I believe Swai Chow is a Chinese name for grappling, or let's wrestle, whatever, how it translates. Then you'd have stand-up fighting, so the karate is the Shotokan, like ours, Kempo. American Kempo is a very stand-up system, but they do groundwork and go to that. So, and then like the Israeli stuff, Krav Maga, it's probably closer to us than anything because we do We do a lot of china, so once the engagement begins, then you have, season control aspects of that. So you just have to figure out what you want to do. So you may be limited by location, where you're at, if you're in a rural community or if you're in town. You may be able to have a whole plethora of options. So just kind of need to know what you're looking for and then how long your journey is going to be. Because when you begin if you're going to study the art, it kind of becomes a lifelong pursuit, wouldn't you say? Like you're, what, 21-ish now?
I'm 21. I believe I started when I was 7, so
Yeah.
coming up on 14 years.
And she's gone to college and, she's been in and out at different times. And basically, you get too far away from it, it calls you back if that's your walk in life. So you want to look at it from that aspect too, like when I was talking about different things, kicking, handwork, whatever. What are you going to be able to do all your life? I know guys that are in their 70s that still do jiu-jitsu and they love it, They're not as active they're more active, they're not as agile, but they also, a lot of them have enough experience, they don't have to be. They can just be that slow movement, think through it,
Well, and that's another benefit of studying a martial art, regardless of which one, for the duration of your life, is that you maintain your fitness beyond the point that most individuals do, because you've already strengthened your body. Your body's already used to that from all that time throughout your life.
Yeah, and so that's where we get into the difference in tendon and ligament strength and things versus muscle and bone. And but what we do see is that young men and women who study early, they develop the power and speed characteristics easier than somebody that starts it at midlife. And then it's easier to recall, just like muscle memory. But what's interesting about martial arts as an art is that you can still improve. So for me, I started earlier, so I am still able to develop more hand speed, and most of the masters I know will say they peak around 55 and then solid till you're in your 60s, and then the decline starts to come. So it's a longer, if you're a fighter, health has changed now, but when I was younger, 28 was about the end of a fighting career, whereas a martial arts career goes.
Well, and that would be either professional fighting or amateur fighting, but that would be in the ring.
Yeah, that was professional.
Injuries and concussions especially are a big one.
Yeah.
That would be what would be career ending in that regard.
Yeah, and it's just like football or anything else, where
as
it's
a sport,
a lot of a lot of strain on the body. So anyway, so those are some things to look at when you're looking at choosing an art. Do you want to be stand-up, groundwork? Do you want to be all those? Do you want to be weaponry? A lot of systems are strictly open hand. Others cross over into the weaponry. So a lot of Filipino stuff, they do the kali and eskrima and all that. And so I think those are all nice. There are other dimensions that you should have if you're going to be a martial artist. They do a lot of knife work. I do knife defense. I don't teach knife work because I just don't like to go there. But fine, you may have to look around. You may have to try some stuff, figure out what you do like, don't like, whatever, find another school. Whatever you do, just kind of try to find a family, because that's going to be what you need, so it'll work out well.
So your choice is going to be dependent on where you're willing to go or what's in your area and what you're interested in is what you're talking about. So research-wise, that would be that. How would you find a reputable or good instructor or school? How do you know that one is of good reputation and is going to teach you what you want to know?
Well, I wouldn't use Google reviews. That might not be the best.
Don't use Google reviews, okay?
I'm not sure.
So how do you interview an instructor?
So if I were to interview an instructor, first what I would want to do before I did anything, I wouldn't even take the class. I would ask to observe some classes.
Observe the class.
Yeah, and then I would look at how the community of people that are there, how they get along and how they mesh, because you're never going to have 100% cohesiveness. You always have people who are outliers, so you always have. Sorry, somebody's going in the door.
We'll just cut it out.
Yeah. So. Okay, so I would also look at the atmosphere of the group and see how well they mesh together. Are they, how well are they studying together? Just what you think you can understand, and you can also, depending on the school, a lot of times you're not learning directly from whoever you're talking to in the beginning. They're going to have assistant instructors, or it just depends on the size of the school. And so how much attention are you going to get? What's that going to look like? So that's what I would do first. Then I would interview them. Then I would figure out if budgeting is an issue, which seems to always be an issue. You need to figure out cost.
What would be what you would expect it to cost for like an average school?
So that is very regionally, probably rural areas, you're looking at $60 to $80 a month per student, up to $250 per student, and depending on how much interaction with your instructor or level of the instructor, whatever, within, once you get into the urban communities, the cities. And it also depends on the income level of the region you're in. So, not necessarily the income level. So the cost of real estate to have a storefront or a school is going to play into what they have to charge.
So in a higher cost of living city, you would expect a higher cost of membership. Yeah, so
like
school.
if you're in California, well, let's just take it like where we are. Okay, so the cheapest you can rent 1,000 square feet where we are is maybe $800 a month. Okay, it's probably going to be more like 12. But if you just go 30 minutes from us into the metropolitan area, you're not going to be able to touch that for less than $2,000, $2,200 a month. And then there's going to be other things that go with that. Plus, they have to heat the space and keep it open, and there's just a lot. And now, did they have to commute? Did they live close? There's a lot of factors that play into that. And then, is it a one instructor school? Is it multiple instructors? Are they, the larger the school, the more they're going to do competition stuff. So then they're also going to be able to merchandise to mitigate that cost. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But if you just want, sometimes like guys will go to two schools. They'll work out of two shops. One where they have a lot of people to work with, and then one where they get very individualized instruction that's, like in a gritty basement or something somewhere, right? So sometimes those are the best, but you don't have a lot of students to work with, and, the ceiling may be so low you hit your head. But
so some other things that would go along with that. So usually there's a monthly cost,
so usually a monthly cost, and then some schools it's an annual contract, and they're going to want to auto debit it. So all those things are going to play more into the cost of the space where they're at, and then
testing fees. There's usually
So we haven't ever charged for testing fees. We ask you to pay for the paper and the belts and things like that. So the hard costs, the uniform, you provide your own uniform. It depends on, so a lot of schools, the larger schools, the divisions of it, so if they have a competition team, you may have to have a separate uniform for that. They just have ways to monetize it so they can afford to continue to produce the art. So there is a difference though. At some point you grow to where it's like getting a gourmet sandwich versus buying something from, fast food, because there's such volume. And then sometimes those volume schools grow to a point where they have enough individualized stuff that now it's more back like, okay, well, I can, if I want to pay for it, I can get that gourmet level of instruction. So
there's something out there for
yeah,
everybody.
so there's like all these, pathways through that. And the guy that is teaching in the smallest little venue, he probably has the roughest time, because he's probably not going to put you on a contract. He's just going to want you there, and he's probably just teaching to make the art go forward. He's not doing it for a living. He just feels called to that. And like my situation sometimes has been that I have children that are my students, and we're going to carry that tradition on. So if we're running a 10 or 12 student school, or a 25, or like my instructor, he had 60 on the floor, but sometimes he'd have 100 on the books, or 120. And it depends on the space you're in and how committed you are to it. And then what they have coming up under them. So like with us, it takes a long time for other belts to become instructors. So faster paced schools, they're going to have more people moving into that instructor level. They're also going to have a bigger pool to draw from, so they can have more reliable people for those things. So like with for example, with me, I've had injuries with work the last decade. Every couple of years I have something, and then I have to rely on some of my other people like her to help instruct, and which she does a very good job, by the way. She's a great teacher, but which has made her a great teacher, having to fill that gap. But you just have a broader, with bigger schools, you have like, you go to class, there are going to be people there. Like when you only have 5 students and the flu's going around and a couple of them get sick, then you're like, oh well, now I only have 1 or 2 showing up, and you have to reformat how you work. And so that's the biggest advantage to larger schools, is that when you're doing drills and like sparring is a big one, because you get a large diversity of sparring partners.
People to practice with that are not necessarily, for example, in my case, usually my sibling.
Not always.
In a larger school, you have people of different height, different weight. There might be a mix of men and women, or adults and children.
Gender changes too.
Different levels of skill or proficiency or advancement, or however you want to look at that. So that is helpful if you are. If you're trying to be proficient at the art, yes, but if you're also interested in competing in whatever arena, or just general practice against opponents. Something else to consider if you might want to be in a larger versus a smaller school, or class size. You might want more attention on you if you want more help, if you want more instruction. If you're nervous, or you're not confident, or if you're kind of scared to approach it, larger schools, they maybe are going to have a lot less attention on you. People aren't really going to be watching you. You can kind of hide in the back sometimes. I've not had that opportunity, but sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not, because in a smaller school, they're going to notice if you're struggling. They're going to know what needs to happen to help you, whereas you might kind of fall to the back a little bit if you are in a larger school. So kind of there's a give and a take. A lot of bigger schools tend to be good about having enough instructors in the room to cover the floor. So that's not always a problem. That's not necessarily for sure going to be a problem, but something to consider if you're hesitant about somebody watching you or being embarrassed or anything like that.
Well, and so smaller schools are also going to give you the time. A lot of times they're going to give you the time if is a slower journey for you. Like if you're not as athletically, say that you have whatever limitations, but it's going to take time. So some people just learn slower. So I have people who can do drills like excellent, like they can spar, they can do that, but then like on the form or the kata format, that's a different learning process. So sometimes that's long. And then I have students where they can do that and just like boom, you're like, okay, it's only been a week. This should have been like 6-8 weeks or longer, whatever. It depends on what it is they're learning, and you cannot give them enough to feed that. But then they don't want to do the other side of it. So,
and that's another thing to consider too. Is some schools do lots and lots of form or kata, whichever term you want to call it. Some schools do none. Jiu-jitsu is very much. They're going to test you on proficiency and on drills.
Yeah.
They have maybe short form. Some schools might call it that.
They have like a short self-defense entry.
You will present some form of skills, yes. Yeah. They'll have a criteria list, but it's not necessarily the traditional set of movements that we consider.
It's not going to look anything like a kata,
right.
Except for they do like to the takedown. They have some like slaps and stuff.
Just an example.
They have some engagement process, and they're supposed to be proficient in that. The rest of it is literally rolling and being proficient in that whole process, and that is the whole body mechanics. The body has to learn it. It's not so much it is the mind, but it's the unconscious portion of the mind. So it's that's why it's a long journey through that. So,
but you may want to learn form or not. You might hate it. You might love it.
Yeah.
So that might play into your decision a bit about which art you will pursue or which school. Some schools will test you based on that type of proficiency or not.
Yeah. So like my personal journey, like I did not like form that much. I appreciate it now because it made me the martial artist I am. Oh, so going back to individual attention. So it seems like around 12 students, 8 to 12 is a good number if you want a lot of attention as far as the instructorship. Now they may have enough instructors on the floor at a larger school that you maintain that ratio, but you're still going to break out and do more bulk sessions of how it goes through. And we see that at any school. So like, you get through the first half, then, the upper belts get a lot more attention, not necessarily daily, but when they ask, they get it, right? Because there's more investment there. I was going to say about, well, I just lost the thought, so it's okay. We've covered a lot of ground, but
what else did you want to talk about as far as the long journey?
About larger schools, you're talking about cardio and stuff. So like the way I teach or the way I instruct is when we do like heavy bag boxing work, kickboxing, all that, you're gonna get cardio and strength training out of that. But on the dedicated kata days and stuff, we don't do cardio. Like you get 45 minutes to an hour of instruction. It's there for me to give you knowledge. It's not there for me to have a workout session. So.
And some schools offer that separately, like a morning class.
So like a lot of, and so other schools though, like, so for instance, like on the jiu-jitsu side, they do a lot of warm-up because they want you physically conditioned to, to go through that fight for a long time.
And to not get injured while you're rolling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people just won't put that time in on their own, so they force it in the class. And so, everybody approaches it differently. Since I have my own school, I can say, we're going to work, and this is knowledge, but you better come in stretched and warmed up, and you're here to learn. And if you don't do that, then it's on you, and your process is going to be slower. So, but I was thinking as you're talking about larger, so what is really nice if you're, so you say you're doing a throwing art, or your system includes a lot of throws, the more diversity of height in your students really makes a difference, because you get to learn what it's like to go way up high and come down, and what it's like to be just like compact and just flipped right on your head.
When I was very, very little, we had some other students. They've started families now or moved or, whatever. But they were probably 6 feet tall.
We had a few, yeah.
And I was
6'2", 6'3".
like 4 feet tall.
Yeah,
so,
you were little. Yeah.
So it was interesting for them to have to learn how to throw me and not launch me into this atmosphere. And for me to have to learn how to throw something much larger than myself as a child, and how to do it properly, because it forces you to learn correctly.
Right. Yeah, so ultimately the structure of your form, if it's correct, if you're technically correct, it should all work.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so like in your example of bringing them down.
Very extreme example of size difference there, but yeah.
But still the same process.
The mechanics are all the same regardless of how you're built or how your opponent is built, theoretically.
So, and with, people who are bigger and smaller as far as mass too, there's a lot of diversity in that. So you have to learn how to manipulate that. And that is even more difficult, that your technique better be right, because the body mechanics of it, if you're right, will work, and if not, you'll get squashed along with or you'll get whipped, because there's so much, they don't have to be taller than you, they just be so much more mass that they just, and you're like a rag doll, so you better have your form in order on the landing side too. So those are some factors to work into it. Did we talk about health benefits?
We did. We touched on it a little bit.
Okay, so yeah.
I would say the one difference with learning it as an art, like, yes, it is a lifelong pursuit, but it gives you the opportunities of the other factors if you so choose to take it in a different direction or take it in your own direction. At least with my experience, if I wanted to go compete, let's say I wanted to compete in form, I could go to tournament and do that. If I wanted to join a drill team, I could go do that and present. If I wanted to, we've had some people that train for fights. We've had some people go to different boxing gyms and.
Yeah, so because we've been a small school for, I don't know, 6-8 years now, but so I will have students that they want to compete. I'm like, okay, you have to go find a school that can provide that, because I am 47. I'm not gonna box with you when you're 23, and I'm not gonna
sparring.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take a beating, 3 days a week just so you can learn to box.
So they have to find their own partners outside of class. Okay.
So, so they will, and so like a lot of gyms like that are training fighters, it's just a monthly deal, right? And so finding a good one, that's a whole different process than finding a good gym, because a lot of gyms are just, it's the gym and then you can drag in your own instructorship with it, or it's one guy that owns it all and he's trying to hold it together and produce fighters. So there's that's a whole different animal. So
you can go in those directions, and then with the majority of martial arts are martial arts because they are for martial purpose, for fighting, for self-defense. So how does that move into that?
Well, so I don't really know very many people that started out because they didn't want to learn to fight. I mean, there are some that choose like maybe more of the Tai Chi route, where it's
they're doing it just for health, not just for
and that is perfectly fine. We see that more with me. I see that more with guys over 60 that they, they're kind of the back end of the baby boomer. I guess they might be Gen Xers, but anyway, they've been active all their life, and I mean, they might be able to run more than me. Some of them run a lot, but when we put them into this format, they find out they don't have the strength to do it because their body, can't. It's not been trained to understand how to do that. So they begin, but they ultimately, they want it to be twofold. They want it to be for their health, and they want to know that they can still deal with somebody in a self-defense format.
To protect themselves or potentially somebody else.
Yeah. Well, they just want to know they can hold their own. And I mean, I wasn't going to say that, but I was like, I might as well just say it because that's where it's at. And the older you get, the more that's a concern. Although, like, the younger generations seem to not be as tough as the older ones lately. But I'll just throw that out there too. But there's a lot of hope. I see a lot of young people who I think it's starting to go the other way that have the wherewithal to hang in there and do things. So, but there's definitely some soft gaps in there. So that's what we see is they want to stay healthy and mobile, and they don't want to get hurt, and so they also don't want to get hurt in a fight. So they're looking for somebody who will train them, and that's the first thing they'll say is, well, I don't want to get hurt, but I want to learn to fight, or well, I want to learn to take care of myself. Is usually how that conversation will go. Women really take to it; they really like it. So they generally have more flexibility at that point in their life, and so they can pick it up quicker than men can. So many guys, they're just, if they were in the blue collar trades, like their body's just rough, right? And so that can be true of women too, but we see more capability with women, and women's bodies are built differently, so the balance is not the same because men have more upper body weight, and so there's differences in how the core of the body has to develop. So anyway, this is all very technical. We're getting way up in the weeds, but
so general fitness, health benefit. We didn't go too far into that.
Yeah.
There's some community aspect to that.
There is, and that'll be determined by the school. I know there for a while, a few years back, there's a restaurant next to the dojo we had, so Saturday mornings were, if you showed up to school, we're going to breakfast when it's done, because they serve breakfast till 1. Well, they still serve breakfast till 2 when they shut down, but no pancakes after 11 o'clock, so you better close class early for that if you want them. But, so that was cool, and then when students would go, and sometimes I buy them breakfast, and sometimes they buy me breakfast, but mostly if everybody can just take care of themselves, that'd be great.
So we get a big table and we hang out there.
Yeah, and then, we'd also make sure we tipped well so that the waitresses didn't think like, oh, here comes the kung fu guys again.
Rolling in.
So, anyway, because you end up sitting there for quite a while. You usually have some discussions, and so that's the family side of it, and so, that would be the ones that can show up on, when we did that. And, but, you have other students that, you don't hear from for 5 or 10 years. They go off to get married, whatever, and then they call you and like, hey, Sifu, like, I'm back in town. I want to, and they'll come in for a session or two. It's just like having a brother or sister or sibling, whatever, and they show up. And it's not always like that. Obviously, there's just people that don't fit sometimes, but try to be good to all of them. And, a lot of times we see that people who have to fight harder for it because they don't have as much talent, they end up being more of your lifetime students as well, because it costs them more, so it has more value.
More dedication.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Anything else? You good?
That's about it.
Okay. So anyway, that was kind of a long conversation. We're going to try to keep that short, but maybe that's all stuff that needed to be said. So that would be the process. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you later. I'm going to leave that in.